Hey, this is Mike, and I'm in Watch Dogs right now, and this is Watch Dogs 1, and today we're going to talk about the UI in Watch Dogs and how it can display things on top of everything. So these mission markers you see right here, it says 518 meters to the mission. This displays through all the geometry, like on top of everything else. So we're going to look today on how to do that in Unity with or without Game Creator 2. You can do it. You can do it with. It's not Game Creator 2 specific. You can do this with anything in Unity. So we're going to look at it in the 3 different pipelines, because each pipeline has a different way of accomplishing this. So we will take a look at that. So if you look here, so this mission marker displays through the geometry. It's a world space UI, so it actually exists in the world. You can walk up to it, and that's when you get up to it, you have to activate it to activate the mission. So as we drive towards the mission marker, it updates the number of meters to it. So we see it's right there. There's also one like the traffic lights hacking, which appear above the traffic lights, but on top of like the geometry that's around it. So that's also, we'll take a look at how to do that. So you'll notice that this is the mission marker here, but you'll notice that it does not display through the player. So the player appears on top of that. So what we want to do is have it on top of everything else, but except for the player. We'll also look at an example of this enter one as well, but I'm going to put it inside the car, and we'll see that it can display on top of everything as well. But Watch Dogs, this doesn't appear until you get close up to the car, so it doesn't really need to appear on top of everything, but it'll be in the same layer as all the rest of the UI, world space UI, so we'll see if we can put it inside the car and how it displays there as well. So we're going to cover the built-in pipeline, then URP, and then finally we'll look at HDRP and how to do it there. So let's get started. So here we are in the built-in pipeline. I've got a simple city level similar to like an environment like Watch Dogs, and I have 3 prefabs for the UI that I've created. Let's take a look at those. We've got the hack tooltip, which looks like this. This is similar to what Watch Dogs use for hacking, like the traffic lights, for instance. And I have like this free UI pack that gives you these battery icons. So let's take a look at the packages I have in here. The UX flat icons free is the one I'm using for the battery. To do these shapes here, the traffic lights and this sort of chevron shape, I'm using the lean GUI Shapes package from Carlos Wilkes in the asset store. I'll leave a link to it down below. It's only $5, and it gives you a lot of different things you can do to make shapes in your UI. And we have, of course, Game Creator 2, and we have this App UI animation pack, which gives you an animated icons that I use in the mission tooltip, which is this. So this is an animated circular icon. But you don't need to use that. You could use anything you want, any icon you want. Watch Dogs uses a little steering wheel, but I didn't find anything like that, so I just used the circle. So this one is like the one where you're seeing how many meters it is to the objective, and on the right side it tells you like what is the actual mission, type of mission it is. We're not going to go into how to update these in this video, but I will cover that in a future video. And then we have the interact tooltip, which is simply the enter thing that we see above cars in Watch Dogs. You can enter a car. So we've got that as well. I have these set up as hotspots, so by default. So right now there's nothing, no offsets. In Watch Dogs, this appears above the car, so we could change the Y offset there, but I'm just going to leave it inside the car. I'll just set this to up instead. It'll be at 010, which is still inside the car. So we won't see this by default because we don't have our UI on top of everything set up yet. We also have this mission objective. It's just an empty game object with a hotspot in it. So if we go up to it, it'll display that mission tooltip when the player gets near to it. So let's take a look at what it looks like. So there's the car. You're not going to see anything. If you go up to one of these street lights, I'll see the hacking one appear when I get close enough. There it is, hacking traffic light. See, it's behind the traffic light. We want it to be on top of it regardless. And then we can't see the mission indicator until we get close to it. until we can actually see it physically. So that's way over here, right? And I do have it updating how many meters it is. I'll go over that logic in the next video. But so how do we get them to display on top of everything in the built-in pipeline? So here we have the main camera. This is all the default settings. I have because I have a camera shot, it added that. But this is all the default settings. So what we want to do is create a new camera for the UI. So we do create a camera beneath the main camera. This is important. It needs to have the same, and call it UI camera. It's important that it has the same location as the main camera, because and we want it to move around as the main camera moves around. Otherwise, it's not going to display properly. So we want to make sure that's at 000, and it's a child of the main camera, and the rotation should be the same as well. Otherwise, if this is rotated differently, it's not going to display properly. So in this UI camera, we want it to be set to clear flags of depth only, and we're going to set the depth to 10. And the occlusion culling, we want it to be set to UI. We can also add the player as well. The player is in a layer of its own, because in Watch Dogs, the UI does not appear above the player. So we want that. And then in the main camera, we want the occlusion culling to be everything except the UI and the player. So let's take a look at that. And do we see, if we go up to the car, we now see it inside the car. And the hotspots automatically, they billboard, they rotate as you go around. So that's good. We can now see, and it doesn't show through the player as well. And this, when we do that, you'll notice that the player may show through close-up objects like that, just because it's on that top layer. But it's not that big of an issue. And then we can see the mission tooltip as well. And I also have the scaling implemented in this built-in pipeline project, but I'm going to go over this in a future video as to how you would scale this, so that as the player gets closer to it, it doesn't get to be massive. It doesn't have to be massive in size. It'll stay at a relatively consistent size as you move away from it or towards it, so that it'll always be legible. Because if it's not big enough, you're not going to be able to read that from across the map. So you really have to be scaling that up as you're moving away from it, and scaling it down as you're moving towards it. So this is, I believe, how they do it in Watch Dogs and all these other games. You don't notice it, but that's how it remains at a constant size. It's actually scaling up and down. And then let's take a look at the hacking one up here. There it is. Now it's on top of the traffic lights, which is what we want. And it rotates. And I went off the map, but yeah, there we go. And it also rotates as we rotate. So there we have it. It's on top of everything. So that's how we do it in built-in. It's fairly simple. Next, let's see how to do this in URP. So now we're in URP, and in URP, I've got basically the same setup. Same setup as I did in the built-in. I've got a mission objective over here. I've got inside this car. It's going to display a hotspot, and I've got an indicator on the traffic light. So they are going to display by default inside or behind everything, just like regular objects. Okay, so I don't see anything there because it's inside. And then we see the hacking indicator right there and behind everything. So we want that on top of the tree, for instance. And then we don't see the mission thing at all until we look at it there. So how do we do that in URP? Well, URP has camera stacking. So we want to use, so we've got the main camera here. And that's the base camera. So we have camera stacking here. So first of all, we have to create a new camera. So we will create that here. And now this camera, we'll call it UI camera. So for this camera, we want the render type to be overlay, and the culling mask, we want just the UI layer. And in this project, I don't have a player layer yet, but we can create it. So once we have that set, we want to go back to the main camera and check the culling mask here to exclude the UI. And then we can now set up the camera stacking, and we add the UI camera to it as an overlay camera, and that should be sufficient. So let's see if we see it now. We do not see it. What is going on? Oh, they're super small or something. Well, that's not working. Huh. So yeah, so actually it does have to be parented to the main camera so that it's in the same position. Otherwise, you saw what happened. It did not work properly, didn't display properly. So now when we do this, now it displays properly. And we want the player also, we'll set up that player thing as well. So the player, we want to be in the layer by itself. So I'll create a player layer. Set the player to the layer, just say yes, change children, and then we want to add the player layer to the UI and exclude it from the main camera. And that's here. Make sure it's excluded there, and that should do it. Alright, so yeah, we see that this is how we want it to display. And then we also see the traffic lights thing through the tree, and we can see our mission marker as well through the building. So that's working. And the player doesn't, but not through the player. So that's working. Next, we'll take a look at the HDRP version of this. It's quite different from the built-in URP. So we will take a look at that next. So here I am in HDRP. I've got my city level here. I've already got my player in and my camera shot in. When you bring in Game Creator 2 to HDRP, you need to go into the HDRP wizard, and you want to convert all built-in materials to HDRP, because otherwise the Game Creator 2 mannequin will not display properly. So do convert all built-in materials to HDRP and it'll be fine. And the only other thing I changed was the main camera. I changed it from temporal anti-aliasing to fast approximate anti-aliasing. I found that the UI text appears better, crisper, not as blurry, not as pixelated as temporal. You can try different settings on your own. I also have it set to, in the quality HDRP, I want to set it to performance, just because my machine doesn't like high fidelity too much. I don't know if, right, so I just switched it to performant just because it's better for my machine. So what I have set up in here is I have 3 tooltips set up. I've got the mission marker right here in this alleyway, and it has a hotspot that shows the mission tooltip prefab, and I have also in the car over here, I have a hotspot to show the interact tooltip, and I have on this street light over here, I have the hack tooltip on that one. So we've got that. So let's just see how this displays by default in HDRP. Okay, so let's take a look over here. I got it set up at a 20 radius to turn on, so we've got that there. Notice that it displays behind the traffic light. What we want is for it to be on top. The one inside is inside the car. It won't display because it's inside the car. And if we go into the alleyway, you'll see it's not displaying at all until we see it here. So what we want to do is, how do we do it in HDRP? Because HDRP only allows one camera, so there's no camera stacking allowed. It has to be done a different way through the graphics compositor. So what we do is we go to Window, Rendering, Graphics Compositor, and we have to enable the compositor first. And then once the compositor is enabled, it says output display is going to be display 1, which is fine. It creates the composition graph, so we need to edit this graph. And we have a render schedule with a base layer, and that's pointing to the main camera right now. But first of all, we have to set up the composition graph, and we want to double click this one right here. It will open the default composition graph in a new tab. You want to dock it here probably and make it full screen. But by default, this is what it does. You can press Option or Alt, left click to move that around, and you can zoom in and out. And we've got our default graph. We have the base layer. So what we want to do is tell the compositor to render everything except the UI to the base layer, and then we have to create a new layer for the UI itself so that it will go on top of everything else. So what we want to do here is create a new texture 2D, and we call this the UI layer. And we'll drag it in here, and then we can create a node and search for the texture 2D, the sample texture 2D node. Double click to add, and then we want to connect this node into the texture T2. And by default, this sample texture 2D will go to this fragment. This is the output right here. So the output will go to the game window, right? So we need to delete this though. We want to combine these two layers and bring it into the fragment instead. So to do that, we want to create a node, and we search for the lerp node. This is like it's an interpolation node, but it's really like a mix node. It mixes two nodes into one. So, and then the output goes to the base color, and the input here, we want to send the base layer into this A channel, and we want the UI layers to go to the B channel, and we want the alpha channel of the UI layer to go to the T here, so that the alpha channel will control if it's going to be on top of something, so that you can see through the object into the layer below it. So that's all we have to do in here, that we're done with this. So we want to click Save, and we can close that down. Now we're going to go back to the graphics compositor, and we've got this UI layer that it created. So what we want to do is add a camera, and we can call this UI, the UI layer. This one will be the base layer. Okay, UI. They both use the same camera in the properties because there is only one camera. So this is similar to the other pipelines camera stacking now. So what we want to do is tell this layer in the culling mask to do everything except the UI. And I also created a layer for the player. But for now, I'll leave the player in this camera, and then we'll see the difference. And then on the UI layer, we want the culling mask to be nothing, and then the UI. So only the UI comes through here. And we also want to check the clear color. Otherwise, it won't work properly without that on the UI. So now we want to take a look at the camera settings here. The main camera, because the composition, so it created this compositor camera, that's rendering to display 1, but the main camera is as well. So we don't want the main camera to go to display 1 anymore. We can put it to display 2. And then this is the main compositor camera. Okay, so for HDRP, if you're using high fidelity, you're good to go. We need a color buffer format that supports an alpha channel, which is there by default in high fidelity. In balanced and in performant, it doesn't have an alpha channel. So if you want your players to, if you're using a lower quality setting, you want to change this to the A16 one, and then it will work. So the reason it wasn't rendering anything was because I had this set just to that B10, and you'll see nothing is rendering. It's actually rendering the UI layer only. So if I changed this, it comes back. So that fixes the issue. So in terms of HDRP, that's what you need to do. Okay, so now let's see how it looks. Okay, it's a little unperformant here, but on my computer, but here we go. So now we can see it inside the car as we want. The only different thing is you can also see it through the player. In games such as Watch Dogs, you don't see the tooltip through the player, so we can fix that though. And then let's take a look at the other one. It'll display on top of everything as well. And now when we look over here, we should be able to, we can see their mission indicator is over there too, and you can see it through the building, which is what we want. So that's how we do this in HDRP. The only other problem in here is, so let's take a look at this, where it's displaying on top of the player, which is kind of weird looking. So we kind of want the player to be part of this UI layer. So that's the solution. So the solution here is to create a layer called player, put the player in that layer, and then in the base layer, we remove the player from that culling mask and go into the UI culling mask and add the player to that. And that's all we need to do. And now it should render correctly. Okay, if we go over to the car. So now the player, it doesn't show through the player, it just shows on top of everything else except the player, which is good. This is what Watch Dogs does as well. So it's kind of wonky on my HDRP. It doesn't perform well on Macintoshes, on MacBook Pros in particular. So so the other problem is, you'll see that by the time you get up to your mission marker, it's super large. This is because you have to size this to be large enough for when it's on the opposite side of the map. It could be like in Watch Dogs, these missions could be like 1,000 or 2,000 meters away. So you have to size the marker so that you could see it from across the map. But because it's world space, by the time you get up to it, it's like an object in real space. So when you get up to it, it's massive, right? It would have to be even bigger if I had it farther away. So so the subject of my next video is I'll cover how to get this to scale appropriately so that it's always a constant size as the player moves through the level. And in that video, I'm also going to cover how to make this how many meters to the thing display as well. So we'll see how to determine how many meters the player is away from the mission marker and update that accordingly. So stay tuned for that video. And if you like this video, subscribe for more videos that cover various topics in Game Creator 2 and Unity. And we will see you in the next one.